to UAP's Roundtable, Removing the Walls, the Magic of Public Art Events. My name is Dr. Chetana Andary, and I'm a Senior Principal at UAP, the company committed to making incredible temporary and permanent public art across the world. We are deeply interested in how arts, culture and creativity bring people together and its impact on the way we engage with ideas, places and cultural identity. So this roundtable discussion has been initiated by the meteoric rise of temporary art events and festivals in cities and the blur between exhibitions and entertainment, a category I refer to as arttainment. So first, I'd like to welcome and acknowledge our wonderful knowledge bearers. From Saudi Arabia, I'm thrilled to welcome Dr. Eiman Elgibreen, the co-curator for the inaugural Noor Light Art Festival in Riyadh this year. And from Australia, I'm equally excited to be welcoming Olivia Ansell, the creative director for the annual citywide Sydney Festival. We are so pleased to talk with you both today to explore this topic with issues such as identity, public space, cultural narratives, and shaping our future. So why do the public love art events? Is it the love of the spectacle, where art meets entertainment, breaking down historic cultural barriers? Or is it the disruption of the everyday, that staging in unusual places that draws the crowd? Cities and places have long counted the economic, social and political benefits of art events. They build cultural identity, attract new customers, seduce talent to relocate and investors to take notice. So balancing this cultural tourism of city marketing with the sustainable development of community placemaking, we are keen to get a background to these ambitious events and then discuss how, as curators, you navigate your complex and challenging role. Our first curator, Eiman, you were a co-curator for the inaugural Noor Light Festival, which included over 60 artists illuminating the Saudi capital. Can you please tell us more about this ambitious program?
Yes, sure. Nice to meet you, everyone, and thank you for having me for this occasion. So to go and just explore Noor Riyadh, what it is. It's basically Noor Riyadh is the first edition of an annual light art festival, part of Riyadh Art Fund. And why it is important is because it's the first of its kind in the region, not just in the country. And also because Riyadh is really not known as an artistic destination. So it was really a challenge. So to tell you more about Riyadh first, Riyadh is a huge city with a population over 10.5 million people, and nearly 40% of these are expats, and then you have the rest of the population is mostly people from all around the country who came to the capital for livelihood. So it's such a complex kind of an audience, and then also to think of that festival as an international also festival, there was also this new challenge. So what we propose is that to have 3 different curators so we could focus, because the locations are so many, and then also the expectations were high. So for the international artist, we had my colleague Vincenzo De Bellis, and he was responsible for getting many really important names. And then we had Pam Tunin, who was an expert in light art festivals. She was responsible for getting really brilliant light art designers. My challenge is to get local artists, and why it is a challenge. Of course, every project has its own challenges, but for this particular festival is that local artists usually are not interested in light as a medium. So how could you convince them to participate, and then how can you remain consistent with their previous work? So, and then the time also limit and all these challenges. And we were working distantly. So there are so many things. So the entire festival were actually planned and produced during quarantine. So there are so many things to remember. So my approach to the festival, because it's the first edition, And again, because Riyadh is not known as a cultural destination, as an artistic destination, I really wanted to create some sort of a brand by highlighting a local talent. So I proposed to have 3 different categories of artists. So we would have the emerging established artists who were based in Riyadh or had their artistic training in Riyadh, because I wanted to give something to the locals that they will feel represented for the first time in the art scene. And then I would have also tributes to pioneer who contributed to the urban planning of Riyadh, which happened in the 70s. And then I always want to introduce 1 or 2 newcomers to make everyone feel represented, and also open door to the future of the art scene, and try to envision how it will look like in a few years. So this is basically how I approached the project. And to give you an example, these are the locations we had. We had more than almost 9 locations, but in every location you would have multiple installations. For example, in one location we would have 11 site-specific installations. So, and then working with other curators, and you have all these site-specific work. It's such a challenge to do. And really, like, everyone had their own challenges, but magically it all worked out, I guess, because the locations had very specific identities that really helped us envision and choose the right work for that location. So you can see, like, this map really shows you Riyadh right from the airport all the way to the south. And you would have very new areas, very commercial locations, and then you would have very local, very historic locations. So it was really a fun challenge to do. So the total for the site-specific locations was 33. So what we decided to do with the local artists is to do all new commissions. And as much as it sounds challenging, it was also freeing. And this is why I decided to choose artists who lived in Riyadh, because I really wanted them to feel that they are given the opportunity to represent the location and the space and their experience in that space from a local perspective. Although most of them are actually artists with an international exposure and aware of certain things, and they have their own lines, like their own topics. So I will go through a few samples just very briefly. So here's the financial district, and these are some of the installations that were installed there. Most of the work there was international artists. However, the local artists I've chosen were very focused on local yet international causes. Ahmed was here, Ahmed Matar, in his powerhouse work or installation. It's basically a metaphor of how modernization and urban projects have hit the society and then created these really unique forms that represented in the filigree, and then so you don't know how to feel about it. You are not sure yet, do you like it or not? So it's open a discussion. Here, one of the challenges is that we are having we were requested to install a work in the courtyard of the mosque, and this is such a sensitive thing that only locals will understand. So you need to have a work that with no sound that will interfere with the prayer sound, and then also with no triggers that might offend people. So it seems really perfect to have Lulu Al-Hamoud, who is known for her 2-dimensional work. Actually, she never does. She rarely does installation, but the work is usually very abstract. However, it is generated through an algorithm based on Quranic verses, Arabic words, numbers, and so on. So we created this kind of a shrine, and then you go there, and even the blue has a symbolic meaning to her. She's interested in the spiritual, not necessarily Islamic. However, it's really linked to the locals' culture, because she is referencing a blue light that you see after dawn and after sunset, which also mark two more important prayers in the day. So yeah, and then going all the way to the historical district, and you would have all these kind of all the dots that represents site-specific installations, mostly commissioned for the work. Here we have, for example, a video, a science fiction video on renewable energy, renewable sources of energy, and then we located it inside mud houses, 3 mud houses, because it's really discuss and try to imagine the future of the GCC. And he brilliantly imagined how in the future, GCC people might discover a desert plant that will be a source of alternative energy. So in a way, he's opening a discussion about the future. However, he's linking it to the local environment, but reminding people that chance is no longer a choice to think of for a source. We need really to work for it. And then we would have, for example, this work. It's a projection of over a water screen on the top of the National Museum. However, the gardens of the museum are very famous destination for expats living, especially from the workforce, like nurses and workers and so on. So the artist, she enlivened the museum by adding this screen where it's basically narrations of poetry in collaboration with an artist from the Philippines and an artist from India in Urdu and in Tagalog, and also the artist is presenting something in Arabic and in English. It's about diaspora, because the artist was prevented from seeing her family who were stuck in Canada for a whole year. But she also wanted to acknowledge that this is a shared experience with the expats who are living here and not being able to go back home. So yeah, we had like all these things here. For example, one of the popular pieces in the festival is My Mother's Drug. Also, the artist is representing how villagers who go to the city feel lost, and then he's sharing and inviting people to have the same experience. Well, whenever he feels lost, he usually sits on his mother's rug and feel that he went back to the village. However, this time he recreated light images of projected images of the rug and the whole layout of the house. So you would have this kind of being washed out with light and patterns and so on, and having this kind of a spiritual moment. However, you suddenly realize that the ground is basically sand. So you're not just remembering how it feels to be connected to earth, but also it really triggers your inner child, and you start playing with the sand, with that illusion. Such a simple way, but a very engaging. Then I will conclude with this work. I will not go further. However, I will show you how the National Library was proposed to have a projection over the facade. However, for me, this is an opportunity to retrieve a chapter of the city's history. So I wanted to do a tribute to one of the artists who contributed his work in the 70s as public monuments, which really linked to this project in a way, because it was also funded by the same authority. However, his work was lost, destroyed during Gulf War, which caused an emotional loss for him. But also there was budget cuts, so they didn't complete and install the rest of the work, which also caused financial loss for him. So he went through a depression. He eventually took his own life. However, before doing that, many people didn't know that he donated his entire book collection to the National Library. So for me, it really a moment to remember the contribution of these artists to the city. And then it wasn't enough for me. I still wanted to have some ground for this light art festival, because everyone everyone was asking, why light art? Why do you start with this festival? So through the process of research, we discovered that the family had some work from that period, the period where he was depressed. He was really exploring with computer graphics. However, he's known for oil painting. These were never shown, and you can see that he was kind of confused on how to present these. So he framed the floppy disk, and we insisted that we play the floppy disk and explore what's inside. And then we discovered this really like different design, and it's very colorful, doesn't really represent what's going on. So it really opened a lot of more research questions. We discovered that initially this was a design for a wedding invitation for one of his daughters, which explained how different he was feeling, although he was going. So yeah, so basically this is painting with lights, because this is pixels of light, dots of light. So it really fit so well with the projects. So yeah, and we had like other trivia, but I will have to end it here because I don't want to take so long. And you know how have an idea how it went through the project.
Thank you so much, Eiman. That was really exciting. And it's just so wonderful to get the stories behind the concepts, to understand, the narrative of place and of people. I'm really excited now to hear from Olivia. Olivia, you've been doing a multi-arts, a citywide festival. Please, could you share our vision, your vision with us? You obviously got 3 years to do a number of festivals, so we look forward to hearing from you.
Thanks, Chetana, and fantastic to hear Eiman's presentation. I can't wait to catch up with you in more detail about those incredible artists that you just kindly shared. So I'm just going to pull up my presentation here. There we go. So Sydney Festival began in 1976. So we are in our 46th year currently. And look, Sydney Festival is Australia's preeminent summer event and one of the largest international arts festivals in the world. Since the festival's inception 45 years ago, we've created some breathtaking theatrical moments featuring the likes of Sacha Waltz and Bathsheba Dance Company, James Thierry, Philip Glass, Robert Lepage, Netherlands Dance Theatre in terms of international artists, and an incredible array of Australian and New Zealand artists and artists from the South Pacific, balancing the local, national and international collaboration is something that I feel Sydney Festival does extremely well. We commission and present local, national, international stories and foster deep collaboration with artists and companies and presenters across the globe. And there's nothing quite like Sydney in summer. And for the last 12 to 18 months, of course, our raison d'etre, our mission of local, national, international has been somewhat thwarted due to the global pandemic. But we've found really interesting ways to navigate that. I should say that I have been appointed as the incoming Sydney Festival Director to curate the 22, 23, 24 Sydney Festival programs. And I'd like to acknowledge Wesley Enoch, who was his outgoing Sydney Festival Director, who just completed his 5th festival in January 2021, which was very successful and completely COVID safe, despite the constraints of COVID-19 and border closures and quarantine. And these are just some of the images in front here from highlights in the Sydney Festival. Bottom left, you can see the Domain, one of our major outdoor concert venues in Sydney, and certainly where the Sydney Festival has really, over the last 45 years, created an awareness and an affinity with the Australian public. And we do intend to return events back to the Domain in 22 and beyond. This is a little trailer of last year's 21 festival, and you'll notice that the type of events that we programmed in 21 were to cater for the safety of our patrons during the global pandemic, and I'll just share this with you now.
Will you take my hand?
What's this then?
Take my hand. Will you take my hand?
And so that was our 21 trailer for the festival that's just passed. And in front of me now are some images of really compelling public art moments presented by the Sydney Festival over the last decade. I think festivals in Australia are very much shaped by our seasons. Sydney Festival is influenced heavily by summer. There's an identity to Sydney in summer that is undeniable. It certainly has a strong draw and appeal to attract tourism into Sydney over the December-January period from all around the world. And celebrating our climate and celebrating our public architecture has always been at the cornerstone of Sydney Festival's remit. And here before us, you can see installations. So top left is the beach by Snarkitecture. On the right is the rubber duck, very famous rubber duck that has featured in and around Sydney Harbour by Florentine Hoffman. Bottom right, Dodeculus by Architects of Air and Inside Arts. We have Ephemeral City by Olivia Grossetti and Nick Cave, Until. And on the Nick Cave on the top left as well with Until. On the right, 4,000 Fish by Sydney-based First Nation curator Emily McDaniel. Bottom right, Ephemeral City by Olivia Grossetti again, and the horse trotted another couple of metres and then it stopped by Katerina Grosser in the middle. Carriage Works, very, very successful public art installation, and Radiant Fox on the left, bottom left, by Rebecca Bauman. Each year, the Sydney Festival engages 375,000 audience through its free public programs, which includes obviously our exhilarating outdoor public art, and 125,000 audience attend our ticketed programs annually. And we present over 100 events in approximately 50 locations, engaging 1,100 Australian and international artists every January. Sydney Festival injects millions into the state's economy each year, and Sydney has a population of 5.3 million, with New South Wales population at 8.1. And it's an interesting time, certainly, to come in as a new festival director on what we hope is the tail end of a global pandemic, after delivering a very COVID-safe festival last January. Many of our neighbours in neighbouring cities within Australia have had mixed success presenting their festivals this year in 2021, depending on where COVID is at in the country. So as we look to 2022 and beyond, I think it's really crystallised what's important to us, what to take with us and what to leave behind coming out of a pandemic. And for me, when I think about the Sydney Festival, there's two driving pillars that really highlight where we need to be, and that is identity. So looking at ethnicity, ancestry, our songlines, memory codes, ancient stories, gender, stories by queer, female and non-binary artists, diversity, the architecture and history of our city, our relationship to our land, and our relationship with people and interesting places. And the other pillar is relevance. It's really important that what we curate speaks to the contemporaneity of our current society, the zeitgeist or counterculture within which we exist socially, environmentally, culturally, politically, and scientifically. And I break this down into 4 pillars. So relevance and identity breaks down to empower, engage, explore, and to entertain. And the first pillar is obviously empower, to empower diverse contemporary stories. So that's stories by our First Nation people, stories that are diverse and celebrate women in creative positions of power. We want to commission new works and share stories by artists with and without a disability, and queer stories. We want to join the global conversation to empower a broad range of diverse artists. Engage, we want to engage new audiences and expand the power of the arts through the Sydney Festival. And you can see there the Ephemeral City on the left with High Public Engagement, which is a free event, and on the right, Jurassic Plastic, which is a wonderful sustainability project that would engage the whole family by arts people that we've programmed previously. You know, engaging means free events that put the community in positions of creative leadership. It's work that's accessible. It's blockbuster major events for the city to latch onto and draw tourism. It's engaging young people in music and the arts and celebrating Vigil on the 25th of January. We also want to explore our city and to say to Sydney-siders who haven't left their city in what will be nearly 2 years, we encourage them in January 22 to see their city differently, to get out and explore the underbelly of Sydney. You know, Sydney has this unbridled beauty that powerfully clashes with hedonism and allure. And, you know, be it a speakeasy or a show pony, you know, come and choose your adventure in Sydney. And to discover architecture and real estate and the stories behind that land that you wouldn't necessarily know is a really important way of connecting. And we want to see art in unusual places, laneways, atypical spaces. We want to present talks, have a robust digital program available on demand, be experiential, immersive, and geographical in how we program. And lastly, we have an obligation in Sydney in summer to entertain. Like any city around the world, for us, summer sits right on the cusp of holiday period, so going into New Year's Eve and the dawning of a new year. And we want to rise up together and we want to enjoy the serendipity of summer. If the energy is in the spring, the patience is in the summer, and we want to sit in that patience and enjoy each other's company and relax and restore charisma to the city. And we can do this through compelling children and family work, comedy, cabaret, umbrella events with our major stakeholders like Barangaroo and Sydney Opera House and the Domain, which is owned by the Royal Botanic Gardens. But we have a real obligation to draw people together through the power of the arts. And there are a couple of thoughts around the 22 program and how we can come together as a community. We still have some of the, you know, quarantine challenges of bringing artists into the country, 14-day quarantine. But for me, I think if we can really sort of turn the stone on the city, look under the rock, discover the hidden stories, let people rediscover their city differently, take a tour they never expected to experience. I think that that COVID then presents an opportunity to explore where you live through a different lens, and you know, we need to seize that opportunity and be ready to collaborate globally through innovative ways that don't often mean physical presence. So we do have a range of concerts where we will present the artists exclusively to a Sydney audience, but we will have artists in another part of the world performing live with artists from Sydney in situ in a music concert, for example. So clever ways of digital programming and clever ways of releasing our program on demand to increase the global visitation, but digitally, having more eyeballs looking at our city in a different way than we could ever have imagined before 2019.
Thank you so much, Olivia and Eiman. What two completely different stories. One, a festival that's been happening for many years, that embraces its outdoor environment with people mingling together in the height of summer, and the inaugural Noor Festival, which is a new way of coming together for Saudi, which is going through an immense modernisation. Eiman, the Noor Festival, the theme for the festival, Under One Sky, which seems to link so beautifully with the Sydney Festival. It speaks to a global audience of bringing people together and connecting, which is very much this idea of artainment, where art and entertainment and leisure come together in a very accessible human way for people to be part of a place and to connect with each other. Can you just tell us a little bit more about the change in Saudi in the way people are using public spaces now and how art is bringing people together?
Yeah, of course, the use of public space have changed a lot. For example, 15 years ago, you will only see family groups sitting together in public spaces. It's more of a family matter, I would say. Nowadays, it's also more of, you can also see younger people going as friend groups. However, what I saw through this festival is also that presenting an artwork and more of an intervention in that space really unites the experience of people, because you can go out in Saudi Arabia and go back home and still be in your own bubble, because all the discussions that you will have will still remain in the same group. However, what we noticed, and it was an interesting thing to see during the testing of the work. One day we had to do a testing during the weekend. Usually we would do it after midnight because we didn't want to reveal anything. But one time we had to do it in the museum area, and in the gardens, people were sitting around, and we were actually intentionally trying to film people for our own archive. And what happened is that people are suddenly, and this is expected, they suddenly looked at the work, but then they started to look at each other and see how they react. And some of them will comment and the other one would laugh. So somehow art have really blurred these or erased these kind of cultural distance and barriers between people, not necessarily from different countries, but basically people who don't know each other. So I believe it in some way it will really discuss conversation and maybe potentially make more room for this kind of cultural exchange to happen.
So in Sydney, Olivia, over 50% of the population was born overseas, and linguistically incredibly diverse, with nearly a third speaking a language other than English at home. So talking about the connection and diversity and identity, how do you curate to tell stories that sometimes are uncomfortable truths?
It's a really good question. And Sydney is an extremely diverse community. It's hugely multicultural. We have the Sydney Festival is such a large festival, and it reaches across the CBD and Western Sydney extensively. And one of the things about Sydney Festival that has worked so well over the last 45 years is the deep collaboration with our partners. So working with various institutions, cultural organisations, venues, galleries, museums, the small to medium art sector, the major performing arts sector, collaborating deeply with community to make sure that we're telling a multitude of stories by a multitude of cultures. And that's always been something at the very heart of what Sydney Festival does. And from Bankstown to Campbelltown to Parramatta to Blacktown to Sydney CBD, and we are a city of villages, and within the CBD there's so many different cultural stories that one can find. So certainly that's something that we're very used to doing, and that I think that our audiences look to Sydney Festival to experience. And we're very fortunate that our outgoing festival director, Wesley Enoch, was our first Indigenous festival director of the Sydney Festival, and has really, led the way in terms of First Nations programming and bringing some incredible new Australian work and new Australian commissions to the festival table. And one of those examples is Sunshine Supergirl, produced by Performing Lines, that premiered in Wesley's final festival, the story of Yvonne Goolagong, the tennis player. And that work will tour Australia to over 30 venues and ongoing. There's been other demonstrated examples of success like Black Ties and Black Digger, other really fantastic theatre works that have really shone a light on First Nation stories, and we will continue to do so. I'm very proud to say that Jacob Nash has joined Sydney Festival as our creative artist in residence, and Jake is a proud Murray man from Queensland originally and has spent the last 10 years as head of design for Bangarra Dance Theatre. And we feel really fortunate that that Wesley has injected this incredible opportunity of First Nation commissioning as a stream through the Sydney Festival, and that's something that we will be continuing at the Sydney Festival. And as we come into this sort of powerful moment coming out of a pandemic and a point where relevance and identity are really driving us forward, and we are searching for the truth of our culture. And you know, that there's trauma in that. This is a very powerful time because there's deep opportunity for healing. There's trauma in learning about our past, learning the truth that's not always that hasn't always been available to educate yourself on. And I must applaud the Australian Museum, who have recently opened their exhibition Unsettled, curated by their First Nation director, Laura McBride, which I believe is going online digitally anytime soon. So I do encourage any viewers of this discussion to go to the Australian Museum's website and attend Unsettled digitally if you can't make it to Sydney. And look, it's exhibitions like Unsettled and many other compelling works that we're now seeing come to the fore that can help educate and heal and enable the next generations of Australians to learn authentically about their history. And I think we're at a really exciting time to be leading that forward and be led by our First Nation partners and cultural leaders in Sydney.
It is a really exciting time in Australia, and why I wanted to introduce Eiman and you, Olivia, to each other is it's a very exciting time in Saudi as well, where this modernisation and the Vision 2030 is allowing people to use places in a way they haven't used before. But I know in particular when you talk about uncomfortable stories, Eiman, we were talking before about this idea of celebrating those pioneer artists that had been buried in the past and hadn't actually been brought to the present before, because a lot of education doesn't include art education, and so it was easy for them to be disregarded. So can you explain how you brought these pioneers of the art and made these works that came into public places for everybody to see?
Yeah, well, I cannot take credit for that. It's really the artists who basically wrote the stories that are worthy of being shared. And part of the reason is not they are remembered, but they are remembered as figures. They are remembered as being famous, but no one really know or understand the journey they went through and why they became famous and so on. And no one knows them on a personal from a level or from a personal perspective. It's just they are legends and that's it. So the way I do it is really it's more of a personal also reason. I really go back and each and every project I challenge myself to retrieve a story. So I go and take it as an opportunity to get closer to the families. And as for example, the example I shared is someone who really took his life on, and then it is kind of a really, really bad stigma, cultural stigma that the family don't want to share and no one want to speak about. We all know, but no one would dare to say it. And then also being like led to that stage is also caused by decisions and political and social and other decisions that were happening that in his time. So also this is a sensitive thing to share with the audience. And yeah, but there's always a way in retrieving stories. When you are genuinely interested, people are genuinely also interested with you, and then also it sets the tone. And I always care about the tone of how the message is delivered. There's always a an alluring aspect of sharing that story as something that you would take pride or feel connected to, but also then there is a lesson to learn and an urgency of discussing something that was very sensitive at the time, still sensitive, but now you feel that you can start discussing these issues. And I'm sorry if I'm taking so long, but one of the reasons for this particular person to be chosen is that also is connected to a very huge artistic project that was going on in the 70s and 80s funded by the same authority. However, my concern is that we might repeat the same mistake and really exhaust the fund without investing in our cultural assets and creating other sources for revenues that will basically enrich these programs. So it was an opportunity to open these discussions with the authority while we were preparing for. So yeah, so this is the intention, not just for the audience, but also for the decision makers to remember things and learn from certain mistakes.
That's such an interesting point, because as curators for a public event, you are dealing with a broad range of stakeholders, and your ability to flip between conceptual conversations with artists and logistics and technical conversations with government officials and stakeholders is actually the success of who you are as curators, and why it's so wonderful to have you here talking about the work that you've been doing. One of the things I've always been concerned about with art and artainment has been this very fine line between accessibility and conceptual rigour. Once artwork goes into a public place and artists, the public hasn't actually chosen to go to that site, they stumble across it or it becomes part of their everyday, much more public than, say, a gallery, which is why we are removing the walls. There is this difficult tension and exciting tension that you bring to the blend of conceptual rigour, telling uncomfortable stories, entertaining and making accessible. So just to finish up, because I know we've probably used up our time, I'm very interested in what you've both been talking in terms of future shaping. You are creating festivals and events that not only talk about today and yesterday, but are also opening people's eyes to the type of people we want to be, the future that we want to have, and those conversations that you have with those stakeholders about perhaps not repeating the same mistakes of the past. Do you want to finish, both of you, just have a comment about what legacy actually means to you as a curator? Big question, I know. Sorry to finish this way.
Thanks, Chetana. What legacy means, I think legacy means understanding the environment that you're currently in, so being temporal to what the community need at the time. You know, I know we've said the word relevance many times in this session, but I think certainly it's being responsive. It's being responsive. You know, we talk about climate change, and I know we have several works about climate change in the forthcoming program. And pre-COVID, we probably would have flown the creative teams here to make a work about climate change. And now we're thinking, well, we need to practice what we've preached. So surely that should be a digital collaboration where nobody adds their global footprint to the climate change issue that we're currently facing. So it's about being temporal and really responsive to gain the respect. And we play a role in progressing society, in progressing public consciousness about the big issues. And I think you need to do that truthfully and meaningfully. Thank you. Eiman, would you like to finish today?
Yeah, well, Olivia have really summed it up very brilliantly. What I would add is that specifically for Saudi Arabia is that if you have been to Saudi Arabia, if you have experienced any art event or a cultural event, you will always feel that there is a binary. There's always the past and the future, or the past and the present. And what I'm recently trying to do is to link the dots and to make people feel that there is a past and there's a present and there's a future, and they are all consistent and affected by and linked to each other. So these kinds of binaries are not will not be distorted unless we represent more and more different examples and different stories and different causes. So in order to distort the dialogue we have. So this is exactly what I'm trying to do, and which is why I rarely work with the same artist twice, to be honest with you. Yeah.
That's fantastic. Thank you both so much. This has been a really exciting conversation, and I really appreciate your time and generosity as our knowledge bearers, the ones who develop and curate the opportunities for the general public to be part of art in the everyday. So thank you, Dr. Eiman. Thank you, Olivia.
Thanks, Chetana.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.